My wife secretly worked as a prostitute throughout our entire married life, and I found out it only after 3 years. Be me, Mike. Decided to change my life. Working as a plumber always relied on hands and head. Job has to be done clearly, no questions asked. Don't like theory, like practice. Clients felt that was the best at what I did in Old City. Too easy there, but easy not always satisfying. Year after year fulfilled orders, improved technique. Only fatigue and boredom grew, not salary. Ceiling set not professionally, but geographically. Not attached to people. Hope to surpass limit and find beautiful girl to start family. Living in small town, everyone knows each other. Kind of nice, but everything predictable to point of nausea. Have a name, know what to expect from people. They know you down to last detail. Familiar stability became depressing. Realized nothing would change unless I acted. Life too short to stay where ambition's buried. Big city like another planet has own laws. Not always fair, but chance to get a piece of it. Decided to take a chance. Gathered tools, suitcase with clothes. Handed over keys to apartment. Drove away without turning back. Thought new life ahead would bring money, recognition. Maybe something else I didn't realize yet. New city met me coldly, alienatingly. Had to start from scratch. No one knew who I was, didn't care. People not interested in other people's stories. No one looked an eye or asked unnecessary questions. Just nodded, accepting existence as part of gray background. Lived in rented apartment. Place didn't seem cozy. More like temporary shelter. Room small, furniture old, constant smell of dampness. Didn't bother me. Was determined. Came for money, opportunity, not comfort. Only one idea in head. Earn money, faster the better. Found job quickly, knowledge accumulated over years came handy. Didn't take long to get bearings. Realized lot more opportunities here. Took first couple orders through classified site. Standard minor repairs, clog in kitchen sink, leaky toilet, old pipes. Money paid decent, but not satisfied with sums. After couple weeks intensive work, realized not enough. Wanted something more, had to figure out how to get to next level. Decided to do self-promotion. Created profile on several online platforms. Posted photos of work done, customer reviews. More orders started coming in. People trusted someone with good rating. Earned it quickly by working non-stop. Phone wouldn't stop ringing. Felt things finally going in right direction. But success, strangely, did not bring joy. Had to pay for every minute of happiness with hours of loneliness. More and more work. Clients recommended to acquaintances. Not satisfied. Good at what I did, but when finished orders. Went back to empty apartment. Felt like nobody. Work was life. Nothing left outside of it. Missing someone who would always be there. Often looked out window in evenings. Watched people living life to fullest. Building families, meeting friends, having parties. All I did was fix their pipes. City's supposed to bring happiness, taking away something important. Didn't know what it was. Felt it every night in lonely bed. Daily routine simple. Wake up, work, come home, quick meal, bed. Everything about money, only thought how to make more. That thought superseded everything else. Sometimes tried to think of filling free time. Thought about sports, finding hobby. Thoughts drowned in endless orders. Work became only meaning of life. Loved job, but didn't bring satisfaction expected. Went on for few months until realized couldn't go on like this. Began to notice losing motivation. Each new order no longer brought joy, even if paid well. Money flowed faster, but emptiness inside growing more. Life became vicious circle. Work, food, sleep, repeat. Problem wasn't making money. That was possible in new city. Problem was lack of sense of purpose. Started thinking maybe not about city or job. Maybe about me or just missing something important. Thoughts kept awake, wondered what to do next. Impossible to stay like this. Realized had to change something. Didn't know what. Sometimes felt on threshold of something new. Life about to change, but couldn't figure out what change would be. Knew achieved success dreamed of. But success not giving what really wanted. Money and work only part of equation, not solution. In city where everything about material gain, lost myself. No longer knew who really was. Plumber with good reputation? Maybe, but was that what I was? No, wasn't satisfied with that role, even though successful in it. Wanted more, didn't know how to get it. Every night went to sleep thinking maybe tomorrow would be better. Every morning new work routine would set in, nothing would change. Loneliness became constant companion. Saw neighbors in entrance, never exchanged more than couple polite phrases. No one to confide in, no one to tell thoughts to. City full of people, felt completely alone. Sometimes tried to distract from gloomy thoughts. Went out more often. Walking to places new to me. Didn't help. Walks only increased sense of isolation. Life raging around me, remained bystander. Everything would change if found someone to occupy part of inner world. Couldn't even imagine how soon it would all turn out differently. Like I said, moving to new city more difficult than expected. Didn't know anyone? Every corner unfamiliar and hostile. Huge streets, noisy traffic, faceless faces. Made me feel empty and alienated. Tried to find solace in work, diving headfirst into plumbing. Call system worked like clockwork. More I worked, more I felt tired. Earnings alone not enough to make me feel satisfied. Needed something more, not just money. Wanted personal connections, sense of belonging in new place. At first, didn't orient well in city. Every street similar to previous one. Even navigator didn't always help. Big roads intersected in endless interchanges. Easy to get lost among high-rise buildings. Familiar routes hadn't lined up in head yet. Got confused about neighborhoods. Often spent more time than planned just finding right address. Gradually realized work alone not enough. If staying in this city, had to get into rhythm of it. Had to understand how things worked here. Start moving with the others. Made decision to take care of myself. Not only in terms of career, but also physically. Needed shape, strength, endurance. Decided to go to gym. Found gym near home. Bought membership. Started journey to new way of life. Morning jogging was first step. Gym opened early, got up before dark. Put on sneakers and went outside. Empty morning roads, city just waking up. Became my personal space for reflection. Gym helped not only physically, but also mentally. Started to meet other people like me. People striving for change. Gym had own atmosphere. No room for idle conversation. Everyone focused on their goals. Met people who came to lose weight. Become stronger, better. Unwittingly became part of that process. Rarely spoke, only exchanged brief nods or smiles. Enough to make me feel part of something bigger. Gradually began to make acquaintances. Gym, treadmills, new routes became part of new routine. Could feel how each new morning brought changes. Body felt lighter, thoughts clearer. World around no longer seemed so foreign and hostile. No longer newcomer wandering streets of city. Knew how life worked here now. Every day this environment became more familiar. But one thing remained unchanged. New life required not only effort, but also money. Work as plumber not always enough to cover all expenses. Days when fewer orders could feel budget starting to crack. Living in big city costing more than bargained for. Savings melting away faster than money coming in. Decided one job not enough. Started looking for ways to earn extra money. At first thought about taking additional job in specialty. But time limited, already physically at limit. Came across advertisement for cab drivers. Seemed like good option. Flexible hours, choose own working hours. Didn't interfere with main employment. Registered with taxi company, got work permit. Old car, though not newest, passed inspection. Few days later, behind wheel, waiting for first order. Something new for me. Never worked in cab before. Bit nervous at first, but quickly realized I could do it. Being driver gave flexibility I lacked. Ability to control finances. First trips not as difficult as expected. City gradually became familiar. With each new route felt more confident. Customers varied. Some sat in silence, sank into thoughts. Others tried to make conversation. Learned to understand when people wanted to talk. Sometimes to just drive in silence. Night shifts most memorable. At night, city transformed. Bars, clubs, noisy companies came alive when sun went down. Working in cab gave not only money, but interesting observations. Different destinies passed through my car. Each trip, unique. Sometimes drove tired office workers home after long day. Other occasions, noisy group of young people going to party. Some passengers aggressive or too drunk. Learned to deal with such situations calmly. Few months went by like that. Continued to develop in sports, found new acquaintances, worked 2 jobs, helped maintain financial stability. Began to feel gradually settling into new city. Day by day, becoming part of place. Streets didn't seem so foreign anymore. Work started to be more satisfying. Learned to allocate time and energy properly. Didn't burn out. Night shifts in cab became something of escape. Time to withdraw a little from everything going on around. Just concentrate on traffic, on road. On these trips found my rhythm. Inner peace and order that lacked at first. But at same time, feeling that something's still missing. Work, gym, cab, all important parts of new life. But something else kept me busy. Didn't know at time that would soon have meeting. Meeting that would change everything. During another night shift, always test of patience. Day off meant cab customers more lax, drunk, endlessly moody. Ready for it. Set on doing job mechanically. Distracted from reality. Driving through city, picked up clients from all over. Rarely paid attention to faces or stories. These trips long ago lost any romance or novelty. Just part of surviving in big city. Then, on one of those shifts, first saw her. Lovely girl named Sarah. Routine order, unremarkable address in Old Park neighborhood. Pulled up, waited for another customer. Customer having trouble getting to car. When she got into cab, surprised. Not because looked different than expected. Something unexpectedly appealing about her image. Dressed in simple gym clothes, seemed a little tired. Like everyone else after long day, but her smile made my heart flutter little. her movements soft and relaxed. Manner of speech easy and casual. When named destination, noted to myself, not bar, club, or even restaurant. Hospital on outskirts of town. Little embarrassed, but didn't ask too many questions. Job is to drive, not analyze or ask uncomfortable questions. But silence didn't last long. Sarah started conversation first. Unexpectedly pleasant. No intrusiveness or stereotypical attempts to fill silence. Conversation flowed naturally, as if old acquaintances met by chance after long break. She told me worked at hospital, immediately explained her fatigue. Felt little awkward. My thoughts had been on something else until then. As pulled up to destination, glanced at her bag. Noticed white edge of robe sticking out. She works in medicine, I realized. Sudden realization seemed to complete picture. When she got out of car, felt I had to continue communication somehow. Something in her calm but confident demeanor awakened strange desire. Wanted to know more about her. Before she closed door, asked if minded giving me her contact. Sarah hesitated little, but smile showed didn't mind. When dictated her number and I wrote it down, my heart sank for a moment. Didn't know if meant just another client, another chance encounter, but already knew it wouldn't be fluke. After that meeting, couldn't get her out of mind. Everything changed after meeting with Sarah. Had been person used to keeping emotions under control, not letting anything distract from goals. Work was priority, always did it perfectly. Being plumber in big city meant one thing, always had job if good at what you did. And I was. Customers often came back to me, recommended me to friends and acquaintances. Soon had decent flow of orders. Proud of how quickly began to establish a new place. But after meeting Sarah, something changed. Attention, always focused on details, suddenly began to scatter. Her eyes, soft voice, easy smile, all in my head. Couldn't stop thinking about ways she'd sat in my cab. How our conversation passed without any tension. As if met someone I'd been waiting for without realizing it. Every morning when went to work, thought about her. Hard to concentrate when her image kept popping up. Started affecting my work. Started making mistakes. Used to fix leak or plumbing in matter of minutes. Now job took much longer. Unforgivable. Began to lose confidence in what was doing. Affecting my customers? They noticed I was slow, could forget details, or didn't follow through. Worst part, some beginning to doubt my competence. Reputation. Worked so hard to build. Beginning to crumble. One client, always praised for fast and quality services. Frankly disappointed when made gross mistake. Had to be corrected for hours. My pride hurt. Realized couldn't go on like this. Even so, couldn't bring myself to put her out of mind. Work getting harder and harder. Every time picked up tool, thoughts drifted back to her. Imagined how could meet again. How would take her out to dinner or just talk again. Idea consumed me. Tension building, couldn't find way to get rid of it. Situation aggravated by fact, began to lose control of self. From time to time, when job too difficult, would snap. Once, when client complained, almost shouted at him. Not my style at all. Troubling sign. Couldn't afford to lose clients and reputation, just because thoughts occupied by woman barely knew. But realized wasn't just crush. Sarah was more than that. Every day felt more and more like had to do something. Couldn't just go on living life, hoping these thoughts would go away on their own after finished usual workout at gym. Where wasn't just keeping in shape, but trying to keep thoughts away from intrusive images of Sarah. Decided to do something uncharacteristic of self. Instead of falling back into routine, trying to earn extra money from part-time cab job. Gave self break. Had enough money and good day's work. Decided to go to cafe nearby. Place became familiar, almost like home. Went to gym often, after workouts sometimes came here. For cup of coffee or light snack. Here repeatedly ran into neighbor, guy named George. About my age, renting in same building. Weren't close, but sometimes had few words at elevator or gym. Seemed friendly and quite balanced. In some ways, even looked alike. When entered cafe, saw him at table in corner. He noticed me and nodded. On normal day, probably would have just said hello and sat separately. But today wanted to talk to someone. Seemed cozier next to him than sitting alone with tired thoughts. George turned out to be surprisingly open. Started with neutral topics. Discussing weather, sports, work. Turned out he recently moved to city like me. Still getting used to it. Worked remotely in IT. Gave him more freedom in terms of time and space. No obligations to office or boss. Made his lifestyle different from mine, filled with physical labor and constant orders. Got it talking about how difficult to get used to new place, especially when no friends or family around. At some point, conversation turned to subject of women. George smiled and admitted finally found girlfriend. Pleased that lucky. Girls in this city, he said, much prettier than in former place of residence. I agreed, though wasn't so much interested in looks, as in something deeper, but couldn't explain to self yet. Conversation warmed up. Discussed observations about life in big city, how women here different from what used to. Felt George was more easygoing person. Had simpler and more uncomplicated approach to dating. He joked, Laughed. Seemed all his relationships just another stage of life. Brought him pleasure. That's not how it was for me. At some point, couldn't bear to tell him about Sarah. Told in low-key way without much emotion at first. Just as girl met at work. Described how she came into my life. How brief encounters left trace couldn't get rid of. George listened intently. His face grew serious. Realized that in spite of outward ease, he understood what's saying. Told him how long been hesitant to write to her. How had doubts. George smiled and said was overestimating situation. In his opinion, if girl gave contacts already signed. Encouraged me by telling not risking anything by writing to her. Even if didn't respond or wasn't interested, not end of world. Suggested not to procrastinate and just send a message. George's words turned out to be like key. Been looking for long time? He was right. Really had been thinking too much. About how things could go wrong instead of just trying. Didn't want to admit to self, but fear of rejection holding back. George, on the other hand, was man of action. His confidence carried over to me. As walked out of cafe, already knew what going to do. George's words still echoing in head. His confidence contagious. Suddenly realized couldn't take it anymore. Stood on sidewalk for a while, watching people hurrying about. Felt like boiling inside. Fear and uncertainty fading into background. Giving way to determination. Why had procrastinated so long? How long could torture self with questions and thoughts of what could have been? All empty excitement. Only way forward is to take valuable step. Returned home, tossed backpack on floor. Almost without thinking, pulled out phone. Opened her contact, lonely waiting for this moment. Moment when wrote her number into phone now seemed unreal. As if with someone else. Stared at screen for few minutes, gathering thoughts. What should write to her, hello or how are you? Standard phrases didn't seem meaningful enough. Had already invested so much hope and expectation in this moment. Remembered what George said about simplicity. About keeping things simple. Clenched teeth. Trying not to think about what could go wrong. Typed short message, introducing self and asking how she was doing. Sent it, almost immediately felt chest tighten in anticipation. Everything seemed so important, as if whole life depended on her message. Stood in middle of room, barely breathing. Not daring to take eyes off screen. Didn't have to wait long. After a few seconds, phone vibrated. Her answer appeared, replied doing quite well. Just about to go to work. Answered really quickly without hesitation. Good sign, wasn't it? But now faced with another question. What to say next? Then it hit me. Don't know where it gotten resolve from. Maybe effective conversation with George. Or maybe just tension built up over weeks. Quickly typed next message, offering help. Wrote that could help her get to hospital. Seconds dragged on like hours, getting nervous again. Thinking of what she might say. Maybe already called cab. Maybe not comfortable riding with me? But then her message popped up on screen again. Cheerfully replied that would be great. Heart sped up. She agreed. Stood for a moment, thinking what to do next. Quickly threw on jacket, grabbed car keys, ran out of apartment. Old Ford car waiting in parking lot. Got behind wheel, started engine, headed toward her house. When pulled up to her house, Sarah already standing on doorstep. Looked little tired but still smiling as soon as spotted me. Opened door for her, she got into passenger seat. After greeting with smile, thanked for opportunity. As buckled belt said would be much more comfortable that way. Nodded, trying to hide excitement. Headed toward hospital, same one taken her to last time. Took my time. Every minute in her company felt precious. Atmosphere inside car light and relaxed. Tried to keep conversation going so wouldn't miss moment. She didn't really want to talk about work, which understood. Night shifts clearly no fun for her. Sighed when asked if liked working at hospital. Answer honest and straightforward. Didn't enjoy constant night shifts. Tiredness visible but didn't complain. Rather just accepted as part of her life. Didn't delve into subject, sensing didn't want to talk about it. Switched to something lighter. Discussing movies recently come out. Places in town she wanted to go when had day off. Conversation flowed smoothly. As if known each other much longer than had. Something soothing in her voice. Savored every word, every look. Time flew by quickly. Hospital loomed ahead. When pulled up to building, felt slight disappointment. Didn't want this moment to end. Pulled in front of entrance, she started to get out of car. Thanked again, saying it was great. Even commented that ride indeed much more enjoyable than just riding with cab driver. In response, worked up courage to ask if we could get together sometime during week. If she had day off anytime soon. Got really excited the moment she looked at me with slight surprise. But her smile didn't disappear. On contrary, got little wider. Sure, text me and we'll set a date, she said with same ease. With which accepted everything that was happening. Waved goodbye and disappeared out hospital doors. Stood there for a moment, realizing what had just happened. Step that could be followed by something more. After drove Sarah to hospital and back home, couldn't relax. All thoughts revolved around Trip and her last smile. Before she disappeared behind hospital doors, ordinary encounter with clients should not have been so captivating. But something about Sarah special, something that could not be explained in words. Perhaps quiet confidence or ease with which took life in spite of difficulties. Couldn't stop thinking about her once got into bed. Lay in dark, staring up at ceiling, replaying conversation in head. Wanted to hear her voice again. Know more about her life. Was really that into her? Feeling suddenly came over, as if someone invisible broken through carefully guarded barriers. Had stayed away from such emotions all these years, focusing on work and plans. But with Sarah's arrival, everything turned upside down. Phone on bedside table suddenly vibrated. Glanced at screen, her name came up. Heart beat faster. She had moment to herself. Asked how my evening was going. Pulled self up, unable to believe she'd found time to text. In middle of night shift. Probably one of those rare moments when work allowed for little distraction. Quickly replied, trying to hide excitement. Writing that everything fine but hard to sleep after pleasant encounter. When inquired if she was tired during this time, answer came almost immediately. According to her, job had some peculiarities in this respect, but already used to night duty. Words sounded easy, as if long ago accepted routine of night work. Curious to know how she perceived her life. What was behind her smile? Continued to correspond, she told little more about herself. Learned Sarah born and raised in this town. Knew every corner of it, but thinking more and more about leaving. Wanted to live somewhere else. Change of scenery. At that moment sensed underlying longing in her words. In response, asked what kept her in this town. Already guessing answer wouldn't be so simple. Her next line got me thinking. Turned out about her mother, suffering from alcoholism for a long time. Couldn't leave her and all people known since childhood? Sarah frankly admitted life was difficult, but not shadow of complaint. Spoke of mother with mixture of concern and despair. Apparently, attachment to family kept her from changing. Didn't immediately find something to say. All my problems seemed so insignificant compared to her life. In response, encouraged her. Wrote compliments about resilience and fortitude and responsibility. Realizing probably only thing could say in such situation. She thanked, adding that father abandoned them when she was born. Had to be strong ever since, even though life often kicked her in butt. Mentioned father only once with obvious irritation, as if topic preferred to avoid. But what struck me most was ability to remain cheerful despite it all. Her messages always filled with jokes. Even when talking about hard things, still optimism in her tone. As if had knack for finding light even in darkest corners of her life. Couldn't help but admire that fortitude. How could person with such past keep such cheerful attitude? She continued to work nights, take care of mother, while finding time to socialize, be cheerful and easy to talk to. Every time got text from her like little reminder. Life can be simpler if know how to look at it from right angle. Correspondence went on for more than one night. Would write to me in middle of shifts. Sometimes short phrases, sometimes long musings about her day. Began to get to know her better. Her dreams, fears, aspirations. Wanted to change something in her life, but every time found reason to stay in same place, same routine. Gradually, began to feel that something more than just friendly correspondence developing. Her messages no longer just answers to my questions. Becoming something more personal. She was opening up to me, only increased my desire to be close to her. Understand her to end. Each night without sleep brought closer to realization that wanted more. Could no longer settle for casual correspondence or brief encounters. Sarah had become something much more meaningful than just client or acquaintance. Few days since last meeting, as agreed, Sarah and I went to bar. Meeting set for Friday night, when city already come alive, filled with lights and noise. Chose one of those bars where locals came to relax after work week. Where could have quiet conversation? No loud music, no crowds, just two of us and endless conversation, which by this point already turned into familiar and very pleasant pastime. When saw Sarah looked even more attractive than remembered her. Slight smile that slid across face as approached me made heart skip beat or two again. Gotten used to her presence in my life, but every time saw her, feeling that she was special came over with renewed vigor. Chose table by window. First few minutes spent in light conversation about our day. Noticed that she liked place, atmosphere pleasant. Conversation gradually deepened. As if being carried along by current, talked about everything. From her childhood memories to first time I felt at home in this city. Loved way she kept conversation going. Way every answer made me want to know more. Over time, after few cocktails and dozens of phrases that exposed us to each other, atmosphere between us changed. Looked at her. Seemed as if world around us had grown quieter. Anticipation that something going to happen hung in air. Moment when words no longer necessary. Moved little closer to her, our gazes meeting. Next moment her lips touched mine. That first kiss soft. Like spontaneous movement of soul that could not be stopped. Seemed that at that moment all our conversations, communication, emotions, that had been accumulating day after day, came together at one point. Kissed again, more confidently. Realized that in that moment, Nothing existed for me but her. Whole world outside that little booth and bar had ceased to exist. After that kiss, relationship began to develop at incredible speed. Began to see each other more and more often. Each time looked forward to seeing Sarah again. Would spend evenings together. Sometimes hitting up cafes or just walking around city. Sometimes staying at my house talking for hours. Those were best moments of my life. When felt that had found something more than just casual acquaintance. At some point, relationship became serious. Hardly ever parted, Sarah gradually started moving in with me. Brought her things, filling closets, bathroom. Leaving her books and things on shelves. Felt so natural, like we had always lived together. Her presence in my apartment became an integral part of my day. Thrilled to have her around. However, part of her life remained there with her mother. Sarah still visited her from time to time, checking how she was coping. Her mother still drinking created heavy atmosphere that Sarah couldn't completely shut out. She told me that could not move things completely, because still felt responsible for her mother. I understood and tried to support her. Meanwhile, my life began to improve in other aspects. Working as plumber finally began to bring in decent income. Thanks to word of mouth, number of clients growing every day. People recommended me to acquaintances. Soon started working on permanent basis. Gave opportunity to raise prices for services. Times when counting every penny were behind me. Now could afford better equipment. Even thought about taking on another person to help, because job becoming too much for one. Life seemed to be getting clearer and more stable. Everything going so well that sometimes found hard to believe it could continue. Relationship with Sarah like flash of light in once gray everyday life. Saw her every day, felt her close to me, filled me with confidence. Sarah brought joy, lightness, and meaning to life that had been missing before. Now weren't just crush or infatuation. Relationship that felt deep and serious about. Sarah became integral part of everything that happened in my life. Talked about future, made plans. Though hadn't made any serious steps yet, but sure it was only matter of time. Everything so perfect that seemed nothing could destroy this harmony. But part of her stayed in past. An apartment where lived with mother. Sarah had to go back there, sometimes for night, sometimes just to check on things. Wanted her to stay with me always, but knew she couldn't leave her mother. This issue hung over us like shadow, but believed that in time we would get over it. 2 years since lives with Sarah began to weave together. Every day spent together strengthened understanding and bond. Lived those 2 years in perfect rhythm. She continued work at hospital, I continued grow plumbing business. Faced fewer difficulties, seemed all doors opening before us. Evenings filled with comfort, weekends with easy walks or friend meetings. Sarah gradually moved all things to my place. Visits to mother became less frequent. Confessed felt much more confident and happy now. Easier to cope with burden of responsibility for mother. Happy to see her like that? Free, full of energy and happiness, which had once been so lacking. Conversations about future became more serious. Discussed ideas about how could develop further. What should do to make lives even better. After a while, when saved up decent amount of money, came up with idea of traveling. Knew Sarah never been abroad. Always wanted to see Europe. Became our overall plan. Go on trip, show her cities always dreamed of visiting myself. Carefully thought out everything down to last detail. From choice of cities to cozy hotels to make trip unforgettable. Finally, day came when set off on little European adventure. Started in Paris, walked narrow streets. Enjoyed views of Eiffel Tower at sunset. Sarah delighted. Eyes lit up seeing famous Parisian sights. Only seen in pictures before. Felt happy watching her joy. Then Rome, city where every corner steeped in history. Wandered around Colosseum, climbed Palatine Hill. Ate fresh pasta in little restaurants. Talked about how amazing it would be to live in such place. Sarah couldn't believe never even dreamed of seeing these places before. Every day full of experiences, trip seemed perfect. Final point was Barcelona, city of Gaudi and warm Mediterranean breezes. Spent few days relaxing on beach, enjoying beauty of Sagrada Familia. Everything so magnificent that sometimes wondered if too good to be true. Here, against backdrop of sea sunset, decided time to propose. Sitting on sand, looking at calm waves. Felt no better moment to take step into future. Didn't plan loud effects or long speeches. Everything had to be simple and natural, just like our relationship. Pulled out small box carried since beginning of trip. Opened it in front of Sarah. She looked at me in surprise. In her eyes saw joy and excitement mixed with little shock. Without waiting for her to say anything, asked if ready to marry me. Answer didn't take long. Sarah nodded, keeping eyes on me. Hugged me so tightly that felt heart flutter with happiness. Both knew this moment would change everything. But no doubt it was right thing to do. Ready for it, new bond would only grow stronger after this decision. When returned home after trip, settled back into daily routine. Sarah continued work nights. I continued develop work by day. Seemed as if everything should be same as before. But in fact, things had become different. Now engaged, every day seemed like step towards something new. Already making plans for wedding, discussing where wanted to live in future and what wanted to do with lives. Something special about this return to familiarity. Everything that once seemed mundane now took on new meaning. Workdays filled with sense of something more to come. Work no longer seemed like means of earning money, rather stepped towards building better life for us. Became even closer to each other, conversations deeper. Time spent together valued even more. But on the other hand, return to routine still carried strange feeling. Seemed that now reached such heights, no matter how much life tried to continue at usual pace, could no longer remain same. Everything felt different, future even more certain, but also more fragile. Began to realize that dreams, plans, joys, and challenges still existed in everyday life, but now had different meaning. Sarah became more important than ever. Her presence in life gave everyday meaning that seemed impossible before. After returning from magical trip to Europe, everything seemed perfect. However, more time passed. More began to notice something changing. At first, little things, short answers to questions, coldness in voice when tried to ask how her day was. Sarah became increasingly withdrawn. Communication became more superficial, as if gradually lost interest over 2 years. Every day obvious that ease and intimacy once bound us together, beginning to fade. Tried to put it down to fatigue, that she had too many night shifts and just exhausted. More looked at her, more realized wasn't just work. Night shifts indeed increasing, but reason deeper than just work stress. Her irritation began to manifest more often. At first began to quarrel over smallest things. Cup left in wrong place, question asked at wrong time. Even casual glance could cause displeasure. Began to reproach for things that used to be norm for us. Couldn't understand what had happened. Felt gradually losing her, but didn't understand how to stop process. Intimacy, which had been rare before but compensated by conversations and emotional closeness, now seemed something distant and out of reach. Sarah began to pull away. All attempts to get close or talk ended in irritation on her part. Avoided intimacy. Any attempts to talk about feelings met with coldness and detachment. All building up, felt powerless. Tried to figure out what wrong, tried to make things go back to normal. More tried, more she pushed away. Sometimes seemed she had become a different person. Someone who no longer saw in me what had seen before. Feeling of anxiety and helplessness eating me up inside. One day, after another sleepless night, when couldn't find place because of tense silence in apartment, decided to talk to her seriously. Suggested she consider changing jobs. Felt night shifts one of main reasons for irritability and fatigue. Didn't want her to continue wear self out like that, especially since could now afford something else. But this time ended up being more than just argument. As soon as suggested consider another job, she exploded. At first, barbed remark which tried to smooth over. But then her anger turned into insults, never heard from her before. Sarah, who used to be always frank and open, now turned into person who accused me of everything. That didn't understand her. That her life not just job but duty to mother. That expected too much from her. Shocked. This rage, her words all sounded so sudden and painful. Just couldn't immediately understand what to do. She accused me of trying to interfere in her life. That my advice about changing jobs, not caring but trying to control her. Couldn't believe that's how she saw it. All wanted was for her to be happy, for us to be close again, like used to be. Argument ended when she left for room, slamming door, leaving me in silence filled with echo of her screams. Sat still, feeling devastated. At that moment, realized relationship in serious crisis. Person I loved seemed to have disappeared. In its place left only shell in which pain and irritation lived. Couldn't sleep for a long time that night, going over in head everything that happened between us over past few months. What had gone wrong and how had we gotten to this point? Questions that kept me awake. Relationship with Sarah still strained. Tried not to pay too much attention to it, hoping things would eventually return to normal. One day, however, something happened that finally shattered trust. Ordinary evening when both at home, noticed her taking few pills, asked what they were. Sarah, as if hadn't given much thought, replied they were vitamins. Something in her tone struck as odd. Caused stir, couldn't get out of head. Insecurity growing every day. Felt something going on between us that couldn't understand. At first, tried to convince self just imagination. But soon feeling became overwhelming. Began to notice way she hid things. More often realized something serious might be lurking behind aloofness. Curiosity piqued. One day when Sarah left house, gave into urge and checked her purse. Found packet of birth control pills. Froze, looking at them. Fact completely out of place in our current life. Hadn't had much intimacy in last few months. Her use of birth control didn't make sense. Mind began to spin with hunches and suspicions. Didn't even want a voice to self. Couldn't make up mind to talk to her? What was supposed to say? Ask why needed pills when almost no physical intimacy between us. Everything seemed too strange. just couldn't find right words. Drove Sarah to work that evening, as usual, without saying anything. But silence, uncertainty depressed me, making think worst. After got home, couldn't sleep for a long time, mind spinning with all possibilities of what could have happened. Like being on edge of precipice, but not knowing whether to jump or try to get back up. Eventually, to take mind off heavy thoughts, decided to go out for shift in cab like used to do in old days when needed to unwind. Normal night. Customers same as always. Some tired after work, some returning from bar. Nothing new or unusual. Business as usual until got last order. 3 guys who wanted to get to outskirts of town. Got into car in noisy group, talking loudly and laughing. Tried not to pay attention to chatter. Most often, such companies discuss superficial topics quickly forgotten. But at some point heard them start discussing brothel we heading toward. Didn't pay attention to details right away. But talk about girls working there kept getting attention. One guy talking enthusiastically about girl in nurse's outfit. Who had been keeping busy lately? His words, spoken with enthusiasm, crashed into consciousness. When got to brothel, everything made sense. Place not far from hospital where Sarah worked. Suddenly felt cold sweat run down back. This talk of girl in nurse's uniform working in brothel been on mind. Even so, couldn't believe worse suspicions could be true. When guys got out of car, mechanically took payment, still in semi-conscious state. Hands shaking but tried not to show it. As they disappeared outdoor, gaze fell on group of women standing at entrance. Saw Sarah among them. Standing there, lighting cigarette, wearing same nurse's outfit guys talked about. Froze. Time seemed to stop. World around turned into abstract blurs. Sarah didn't even notice me, absorbed in own thoughts or conversation with other girls. All could do at that moment was just stare at her, unable to believe eyes. She, my Sarah, stood in front of brothel as if not woman knew and loved. Shock paralyzed me. Didn't immediately realize what had happened. Everything new had collapsed in matter of seconds. Whole life, which had built and believed in, now seemed like illusion. In that moment, realized that everything had feared to lose was already lost. Don't remember how got home that night. Everything blur, as if whole world had shrunk into narrow corridor. Only one image waiting at end of it. Sarah standing outside brothel in nurse's outfit. Everything saw in front of me unsolvable mystery driving me crazy. How could she do this? How could all of this have happened? Sarah didn't notice me then. Didn't realize I was one who drove clients to this place. Didn't even notice car I'd driven her in so many times. All emphasized how far she drifted away from me. While immersed in our relationship, in worries about future, in shared plans, she was living double life, hiding something else entirely behind mask of person I loved so much. Mind searched hard for explanation. Tried to understand how all this possible. How could girl from dysfunctional family, with alcoholic mother and limited means, afford expensive medical education? Always admired how she'd escaped hardships of life, how she'd worked at hospital, but now all sham. She wasn't who she said she was. Now obvious that her money not coming from practice of medicine. Tried to remember all moments that had caused doubt. All little things ignored because of blind love. How could have been so naive? All those night shifts, her irritation, her coldness, lack of intimacy, all looked different now, like key signs just didn't want to notice. Loved her, and couldn't imagine that she could lead such life. Sitting in darkness of apartment, realized happiness was illusion. Everything thought was our future together. Plans for marriage, for life together. All turned out to be just lie. Saw Sarah as someone she never was. Was ready to go all way with her, but she was leading double life. Hiding secrets behind back never thought possible. That night was turning point. Faced with choice of continuing to be tormented by this pain, searching for explanations and reasons, sinking into abyss of despair, or accepting it and moving on. But moving on didn't mean forgiveness for me. No, couldn't just forgive her for what she'd done. For lies I was living in. Couldn't look into her eyes and pretend nothing had changed. Knew couldn't live if didn't do something. Then made decision. Would not let her get away with it. Love for her turned into rage that painted everything around in dark colors. Now had no doubt, had chosen path of revenge. Would not be victim in this story. Anger towards Sarah grew every day. Could see clearly now that her greatest weakness was money. Money was her way of compensating for emptiness that surrounded her. Bought everything she could afford. New iPhones, expensive brands, appliances she didn't even use. Easily spent my money and her own as well. Always seemed strange because despite all her expenses, never complained about lack of money. Thought it was because of her job at hospital, because claimed to be well paid. Now that knew where she really spent her nights, could see where money was coming from. Desire for revenge became obsession. Decided to strike at thing that mattered most to her, her money. Sure, she must have savings, but they weren't in bank. Knew Sarah unlikely to use banking for such sums. After all, her entire existence now illegal. Cash, that was her true weakness. After turning apartment upside down, couldn't find penny. Spent hours searching every room, looking in closets, checking hidden drawers. But useless. Money wasn't hidden here. Began to remember her stories about going to mother's house from time to time. Guessed that's where her stockpile might be. Only option. Next day, when Sarah left for regular night shift, decided to take action. Headed to her mother's house. Prepared visit to look like friendly visit with family. When arrived, her mother happy to see me. As always. Had maintained good relationship with her over years. Despite drinking problem, she treated me kindly. Conversation with mother strained but tried to keep cool. Discussed our happy life with Sarah. Though incredibly hard to talk about. Smiled and pretended to be perfect husband. But inside torn with anger. Waited for right moment to be alone in house. Moment came when Sarah's mother decided to stop by neighbor's house to bake waffles for tea. Gave me 20 minutes to get things done. When she left, quickly got down to business. Knew Sarah was predictable. If she had money, had to be hidden somewhere in house. Checked few places like closets, drawers, boxes, but nothing there. Rage building, but then thought about vent. Perfect place to store something that no one could find. Headed for bathroom, looked at vent, realized found what looking for. When pulled grate down, found wad of cash. Tightly wrapped and hidden in narrow slot. Didn't even bother counting money. Just quickly gathered into backpack, trying not to waste time. When Sarah's mother returned, ready to leave. Apologized for having to leave right away, saying had lot of work to do. Hurried outdoor without saying goodbye properly. All thoughts centered on what had done. Revenge beginning to be realized. Feeling filled with satisfaction. Knew Sarah wouldn't immediately realize what had happened. Her money hidden in such way that she hardly checked it every day. But by time she realized it was missing, would be too late. When got home, felt strange relief mixed with tension. Success of plan beginning to feel satisfying, but felt like wasn't finished. Sat down at desk, pulled out backpack of money. For first time in these long months, felt in control. Started counting bills. Initially just mechanical action, but as amount grew. Began to realize much more lying in front of me than anticipated. When finished, stack of money on table, $90,000. Stunned me, thoughts flashed through mind about how long Sarah been collecting that money, and methods she had used. Not only her payment for lying, but also proof of way she led her life. Not only did she betray me, but lived off dirty money. Not paying taxes and hiding existence behind mask of respected medical professional. Now didn't have slightest doubt. Money had been earned illegally, only made more eager to cut all ties with her. Next day, when she came home, was waiting for her with plan. Easy for me to look her in eye, knowing that calmness hid complete confidence in rightness of actions. Calmly told her that new truth. Told her that had seen her outside brothel, heard customers talking, and that her deception no longer working. She didn't try to justify herself, didn't try to deny it. Must have known for long time that sooner or later truth would come out. Her face didn't express fear or anger, but rather weariness. As if she'd been waiting for this moment, she nodded, acknowledging it without further ado. Divorce process quick and almost painless. She didn't even seem to mind. Perhaps she wanted play to end too. For her end of long game, for me liberation. Felt like lifted huge weight off shoulders that had been dragging down all these months. Only thing left was her money. She hadn't noticed it was missing, which surprised me. Apparently, had enough cash on her person that didn't have to worry about hidden savings. Her mother, as found out later, wouldn't let Sarah home, which only played into my hands. Sarah couldn't check her hidden money right away. When she did realize it was gone, it was too late. She texted me, called me, trying to find out what had happened. I ignored her. There was nothing she could do. Her money was illegal, and if she tried to go to police or courts, would only lead to exposure of her true life. All her threats and pleas were meaningless. All she could do was get hysterical and write messages that I didn't read. With money I took, left for another city. New beginning I'd been waiting for. Left everything behind. Not thinking about what had become of Sarah. Her fate no longer interested me. For me, she died moment I saw her at brothel. Now had new life where I was in control. This money kind of compensation for all months of pain and lies I had gone through. Used it to buy myself new car, which had long dreamed of, and to invest in favorite tools for work. My life finally getting better now had everything I wanted and not one more lie.